So thanks for being here, and I know that we have an evening of many artists, so I will be relatively brief in my presentation. The work is in this room, but it would be pretty tight. So please feel free to get up and walk in there if you want to while I'm talking. So this is called Still Alive, and it is a series of oil paintings of my compost bin. And I started to do this about a little less than 18 months ago. 18 months ago, I think it was about then, when you put out a call for this room.
Yes.
And I was working on another idea, and then eventually this happened. So to backtrack a little bit more, I did not go to college for art. I actually studied botany. And my dad was a forester and a woodworker, and my mom was a bacteriologist. So I kind of grew up with more of that framing of the world. And I also studied history for a long time. So I didn't really come to art until my child was 2 and I was losing my mind. And he's a darling child, but I just needed some headspace. So I started taking painting classes at Bemis, and that's where I got most of my fundamental art training. I ended up doing an MFA recently, about 10 years ago, but it wasn't your hands-on kind of MFA. It was more of a let's read French philosophy until you really want to kill people kind of MFA. So I did that too. But I never was able to connect in what I did in art, or I just hadn't figured out a way. The sort of background in botany and the interest in the natural world and what I do with my life, which is eat and cook and garden and chop vegetables. And do a lot of things outside with plants. And I was never able to really connect that via art. Starting with COVID, I spent many hours in the backyard drawing. And I thought a lot about still life, and I thought a lot about landscape. And neither one of those as a tradition had ever really spoken to me as an artist, and I had never really wanted to address them directly as a concept. But I did start drawing a lot of beans and roots and nodules and things like that, and there's a couple of those paintings in there. But then I started looking at my compost bin, and I was just astounded at how gorgeous it was, and I thought, okay, I could paint this, and I could paint them in oils the way I used to always want to paint, because now I could actually do that, and it would be really fun, and it would be really intense, and it wouldn't be still life exactly. And then as I started to play with the idea, I was thinking about medieval still life, because I did a lot of medieval history. There's always this sense of death, the skulls. There's always this reminder of death. And so my flip on that is that it's not about death. This is about a recreation of life. And so then we go to Will Rogers, who said they're making more people, but they aren't making more dirt. Well, you can make more dirt through your compost. So that's the sort of story. And then specifically, all the titles are more or less what they are, although as I went through the process of painting, I got less and less realistic and kind of let them sort of merge and have fun and get a little crazy on the canvas, a little brighter. So this one is, what is this one? Onion skins and garlic. Yes. This is a sunflower. And then there's a lot of other things in there, sunflower root. And this one started out with a lot of coffee filters and coffee running everywhere, and walnuts and lemons and squash. And so if you go in there, you'll see that all the titles are sort of what I ate and what hit the compost bin.
Well, yes, I guess.
Interestingly, so the night of the opening, there was a man in here who I think Abby knows, and I don't know his name, and it's not important, but he had a connection to compost as a concept that he wanted to share with me. And he said, but I don't relate to your compost. I want you to paint my compost.
Oh
yeah. So I said, well, I'm open to exploring the concept, and I gave him my email. I haven't heard anything, but so yeah, so there is sort of a personal take on compost, I guess.
Well, I'm curious, if you were to paint his compost, would there be a startling difference between identities?
I don't know.
Well, that's my question, is how much of in your compost is reflected of your identity as like, are these organic vegetables? Are there other items in your compost that are non-normally compostable? Or do you only use food scraps? So you have coffee filters, but are you also throwing in like paper, newspaper, other elements?
Okay, no, my world is not organic. I mean, I try, but I don't try very hard. I mean, I do try. Because I prefer it in many ways, but I am not very rigorous in that. It's always fresh and as local as possible.
Yeah.
A lot of it is from the garden in the summers. I do add other things to my compost, and this is my kitchen compost. It is specifically my kitchen compost because it is in a little barrel. It's a tiny little barrel. My big barrel that had a wonderful light through the aperture that I could take a good photo in, died, rusted out after 20 years, and now I have this little tiny black plastic one, and I can barely get any light in to take a photo. But it's the bear-proof one. I mean, I have a huge big pile that's just the garden compost. And I add a lot of paper to this, just because otherwise it's just, yeah. And I'm not a very good composter. I've read all the theory, and I don't care.
Nethery, I just, I think so much of my own history in terms of being an artist is really working with unconventional materials that I consider to have kind of a female sensibility. And when I think about your master's in art history, and I think about all the, like the hierarchy of subjects in art history, like there's the history paintings and the religious paintings, and way down at the bottom is sort of still life. But for a woman who spends her time in the kitchen cooking for other people and herself, I just love that idea. I love the idea of making really beautiful paintings with this rich palette out of the detritus of what it takes to take care of people and yourself.
Yeah,
because to me it's so feminine, and I love the reclamation of feminine subject matter in modern art. So kudos to you.
Well, I love that take on it. Actually, what I had started to try to do was to see the world through the eyes of a plant, which of course is impossible because they don't have eyes and they don't move. So I was trying to get at sort of an outside point of view.
I love your palette, and I'm wondering if this is just a product of like your subject matter, that everything's natural and it was all this beautiful, rich the colors, or did you like deliberately create that palette?
It starts with the color of the matter. Certainly this is all very fresh compost. I mean, yes, I could have set it up and then painted it as it decomposes in the traditional still life sense. And also I did play with putting the actual material on watercolor paper and using it as the dye, and I'm still playing with that. We'll see how it goes. Some things worked really well, some things are just really brown and boring. But I haven't really gotten that. But I think that what I let happen was that, so some things, this is cantaloupe, and it was that color, but then I let it really be that color. I heightened it a little bit I just had fun, really was what it came down to. I just let myself have fun with it. And then this is an onion skin, and it's just a brown onion, but in the light it gets that pink translucency and a little salmon color to it. And so I really just enjoyed playing with that. So, and I do like really intense oil colors, and so it's sort of I always felt like it was a real indulgence, and so I just let myself indulge.
You did. Beautiful.
Yeah.